All right, hello everybody. We're on the last, I think this is the last video for Sir Gibbie. It's by George MacDonald. It's from the 1800s. If you were with me on the last video, I changed because sometimes you can tell which video it is based on the shirt color I'm wearing. Like, oh, remember, go back to the one with the black shirt. I know I do that with other people's videos. Anyway, we have Leia. I'm not on the mountain right now. I'm not in nature because different things we had going on. And so I welcome you to this. Just don't worry if you're just joining right now. Trust that you're here for a reason because George MacDonald is such a profound, deep man. C.S. Lewis said that every book he ever wrote, all the Narnia books, every book he ever wrote, he either quoted directly or indirectly George MacDonald. And so let's begin. Let's begin the end. I was just crying from the last part. It was so good. I usually wait a week, but I'm going to be out of town, so I wanted to make this for us. So you get it. You don't have to wait. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Who knows? You never know. You don't know what tomorrow is. So, but I'm just preparing a little bit, just in case I do go a little bit. Don't worry. We've got someone looking after Lele. All right. So we're at Gibbie. Okay, so then indeed was his heart a bliss worth God's making, the sum of happiness in the city, if gathered that night into one wave, could not have reached halfway to the crest of the mighty billow tossing itself heavenward as it rushed along the ocean of Gibbie's spirit. So he was so happy because Ginevra just said she would marry him. She thought he was asking and he wasn't. He didn't even think about that she would marry him. And so he's elated because he has this real, deep, real love, not transactional love. It's just he has this deep love for all people to love them as Christ loved us, right? And then she just gets to be one of those people he just pours his heart out for. People don't realize there is such a kind of love, right? Well, Christ had it for us, and Christ is remaking us. Read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Not this one, but he talks about that Christ is making you into little Christs all over. If you invite him to, you have to choose that. Anyway, he entered the close of the old house, but the excess of his joy had not yet turned to light and was not yet passing from him in physical flame. Whence then the glow that illumined the court? He looked up. The window of Mistress Croale's bedroom was glaring with light. He opened the door hurriedly and darting up on the stair, he was met by the smell of burning, which grew stronger as he ascended. He opened Mistress Croale's door. The chintz curtain of her bed was curtains of her bed were flaming to the ceiling. He darted to it. Mistress Croale was not in it. He jumped upon it and tore down the curtains, and Tester, trampling them under his feet upon the blankets. He had almost finished, and at the bottom of the bed, was reaching up and pulling at the last of the flaming rags when a groan came to his ears. He looked down. There at the feet of the bed, on her back upon the floor, lay Mistress Croale in her satin gown with red swollen face. Oh, I forgot. All right, I have just a battery for that. 1 second. A wide open mouth and half open eyes, dead drunk, a heap of ruin. Right? He told her if she ever drank whiskey again, she couldn't work for him. A bit of glowing tinder fell on her forehead. She opened her eyes, looked up, uttered a terrified cry, closed them, and was again motionless except for her breathing. On one side of her lay a bottle, on the other a chamber candle stick, which had upset, with the candle guttered into a mass. So it was all, candle wax everywhere. That's what had fallen because she was drunk. All right, so I just had one of these, so let me get one because I don't have an extra plug. 1 second. I'll turn the light on as well. I have the mic so I can talk with you guys. Leia, just stay there for a second. I'll put this in the charger. It's just nice to have a light. All right. And then there was light. We'll see. I gotta push power. Uh-oh. Oh, I might have one in my bag. Let's see. Ugh. Technical difficulties, but I want to finish because I don't want this. Oh yeah, I have a bank. Let's see. I just charged it the other day. We'll see. 98%. There we go. Huh? Look at the light difference. All right. Okay. I don't even need the bookmark anymore. I have this bookmark for every time because I think we're going to finish it. All right. Oh, so I like you guys being able to look at Leia because then there's something animated moving instead of me just reading, but whatever. All right. Okay. With the help of the water jugs and the bath, which stood ready in his room, because she had, before she went and drank, she got ready his bath for him for when he got back. Back in the old days, they'd have the bath ready and then you could heat up water. It's in The Hobbit and stuff, right? You could heat up a kettle of water and then make it hot, right? So he had enough water with bowls to put out the fire. At last, in putting out the fire, and then turned his attention to Mistress Kroll. Her breathing had grown so stertorous, I've never heard of it, that he was alarmed, that maybe she had smoke inhalation, and getting more water, bathed her head, right, and laid a wet handkerchief on it, after which he sat down and watched her. It would have made a strange picture, the middle of the night, the fire-blasted bed, the painful, ugly carcass on the floor, and the sad, yet, I had almost said, radiant youth watching near. The slow night passed. That would have been horrible had he come back any later, had he stayed at the Scladers that night. Oh, my guitar's right there. Anyway, welcome to my personal space. All right. Let me see. All right, well, whatever. I say to my kids sometimes, you'll get what you get. You don't throw a fit. So let's just enjoy. We have this beautiful story, so we can just let your mind go to enter into this time. Okay. So the gray of the morning came, chill and cheerless. Mistress Kroll stirred, moved, crept up, rather than rose, to a sitting position and stretched herself yawning. Gibbie had risen and stood over her. She caught sight of him. Absolute terror distorted her sodden face, soot all over her face or whatever. She stared at him, then stared about her, like one who had suddenly waked in hell. He took her by the arm. She obeyed, rose, and stood. Fear conquering the remnants of drunkenness, with her whiskey-scorched eyes following his every movement. As he got her cloak and bonnet, he put them on her. She submitted like a child, caught in wickedness and cowed by the capture. Cowed, right? He led her from the house out into the dark morning, made her take his arm, and away they walked together down to the riverside. She gave a reel now and then, Sometimes her knees would double under her, but Gibbie was no novice at the task because he used to walk his drunk father, not her husband. Mistress Kroll used to give whiskey to Gibbie's father when he was little, and he would walk his father drunk home. Anyway, so he used to walk other people, like politicians and other important men, home so they would make it home too after they drank too much. That's what he did as a child to try to help out. Anyway, sometimes her knees would double under her, but Gibbie was no novice at the task and brought her safe to the door of her lodging, of which, in view of such a possibility, he had been paying the rent all the time. Her old place, right? He opened the door with her passkey, led her up the stair, unlocked the door of her garret, her room that he had been paying rent on, placed her in a chair, and left her closing the doors gently behind him. Instinctively, she sought her bed, fell upon it, and slept again. When she woke, her dim mind was haunted by a terrible vision of resurrection and damnation, of which the only point she could plainly recall was an angel, as like Sir Gibbie as he could look, hanging in the air above her and sending out flames on all sides of him, which burned her up inside and out, shriveling soul and body together, right? She's getting a vision of what was actually happening to her heart in a way, to her soul. When you give yourself over to the enemy, all he wants to do, in John 10:10, Jesus said, before that, he said, he's a liar from the beginning. I saw him fall like lightning from heaven, but he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So the enemy of our souls wants to do that to us through any means possible, through other people, through addictions, through, secret sins in our life, sins just missing the mark of perfect love, right? He's a liar, and he tries to seduce people, tell them they're doing good when they're doing evil, and causes leaks in your spiritual life so you can't get this alchemistic fire that Christ puts in you, this Holy Spirit fire that changes you into something you were always meant to be. Anyway, but Jesus says, I came to give you life and life abundantly, in that same verse. And the next verse is, I am the good shepherd. I love meditating on that. It was just 12:12 into this video. I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so like the and sending out flames on all sides of him, which burned her up inside and out, shriveling soul and body together. As she lay thinking over it, with her eyes closed, suddenly she remembered, with a pang of dismay, that she had got drunk and broken her vow, because she vowed to him that she wouldn't. That was the origin of the bad dream and the dreadful headache and the burning at her heart. She must have water, right? She was dehydrated and hung over really badly. Painfully lifting herself upon one elbow, she opened her eyes. Then what a bewilderment and what a discovery, slow unfolding itself, were hers. Like her first parents, she had fallen, like Adam and Eve. Her paradise was gone. She was in a mansion as a housekeeper with a respectable job, had gone up like many classes that she had been before in the society, right? And what a discovery, now slow unfolding itself, were hers. Like her first parents, right, had fallen. Her paradise was gone. She lay outside among the thorns and thistles before the gates, right? Kicked out of Eden. From being the virtual mistress of a great house, she was back in her dreary, lonely garret, the one room, right? Re-exiled in shame from her briefly regained respectability, from friendship and honorable life, and the holding forth of help to the world, because she kept helping all the people that Gibbie would bring in from the street and minister to them. She was being like an angel as well. She lay there, a sow who had been washed and washed in vain, like a pig, right? Like we just read this morning in morning prayer. It was in the passage. I can't remember, Luke or Matthew. I think Luke, when the prodigal son asked his father for his inheritance and left and spent it all, and all he had was food to give to the pigs, and he longed to eat even their food. That's like our lower animal nature. He had given himself over to his instinct and forgot his divine nature until it says he came to his senses and said, even The servants in my father's house fare better than this. I'll go back and tell my father I've sinned against him and against heaven, and will he let me be a servant? And he goes back and his father runs to him. Jesus says this is how God greets us, right? It's worth reading. Read the book of John, read the book of Luke, and Matthew and Mark. But anyway, what a sight of disgrace was her grand satin gown, wet and scorched and smeared with candle, and how it smelt of smoke and burning and the dregs of whiskey, and her lace. She gazed at her finery as an angel might on his feathers, which the enemy had burned while he slept on his watch, right? She must have water. She got out of bed with difficulty. Then for a whole hour sat on the edge of it motionless. She sat on the edge of her bed, motionless, unsure that she was not in hell, right? She didn't know if she was or not. Look at how cute Leia is. Aww. Anyway, I'll turn it sideways like that. Oh, it's okay. Keep sleeping. Go ahead. She wasn't sure if she was. At last she wept, acrid tears for very misery. She rose, took off her satin and lace, put on a cotton gown, and was once more a decent-looking poor body, except as to her glowing face and burning eyes, which to bathe she had nothing but tears. Again she sat down, and for a space did nothing, only suffered in ignominy. At last life began to revive a little. She rose and moved about the room, staring at the things in it as a ghost might stare at the grave clothes on its abandoned body. There on the table lay her keys, and what was that under them? A letter addressed to her. She opened it and found £5 notes with these words: I promise to pay Mrs. Kroll £5 monthly for 9 months to come. Gilbert Galbraith. She wept again. He would never speak to her more. She had lost him at last, her only friend, her sole link to God and goodness and the kingdom of heaven. Lost him forever, right? The day went on, cold and foggy without, colder and drearier within. Sick and faint with disgusted, the poor heart had no atmosphere to beat in save an infinite sense of failure and lost opportunity. She had fuel enough in the room to make a little fire, and at length had summoned resolve sufficient for the board to get a jug. She could not carry a pailful. Then in the corner stood her demon friend, her old familiar, the black bottle, right, of whiskey, as if it had been patiently waiting for her all the long, dreary time she had been away. With a flash of fierce joy, she remembered she had left it half full. She caught it up and held in it between her and the fading light of the misty window. It was half full still. One glass, a hair of the dog, would set her free from faintness and sickness, disgust and misery, right? There was no one to find fault with her now. She could do as she liked. There was no one to care, nothing to take fire. She set the bottle on the table because her hand shook, and went again to the cupboard to get a glass. On the way, borne upward on some heavenly current from the deeps of her soul, the face of Gibbie, sorrowful because loving, like the face of the Son of Man, like Jesus himself, right, met her. She turned, seized the bottle, and would have dashed it in the hearthstone, but that a sudden resolve arrested her lifted arm. Gibbie should see. She would be strong. That bottle should stand on that shelf until the hour when she could show it to him and say, "See the proof of my victory." She drove the cork fiercely in. When its top was level with the neck, she set the bottle back in its place, and from that hour it stood there, a temptation, a ceaseless warning the monument of a broken but repairable vow, a pledge of hope, right? It may not have been a prudent measure. To a weak nature, it would have involved certain ruin, to just have it there all the time. But there are natures that do better under difficulty. There are many such. And with that fiend-like shape in her cupboard, the one ambition of Mistress Croale's life was henceforth inextricably bound up. She would turn that bottle into a witness for her against the judgment she had deserved. Close by the cupboard door, like a kite or an owl nailed up against a barn, she hung her soiled and dishonored satin gown, and the dusk having now gathered took the jug and fetched herself water. Then, having set her kettle on the fire, she went out with her basket and bought bread and butter. Oh, I'm so hungry right now, right? After a good cup of tea and some nice toast, she went to bed again, much easier both in mind and body, and slept, right? Because her conscience was more clear. She turned from that now. That's what repentance is, to come to a better mind. Metanoia in Greek, metamorphosis, like a change of your mind to this new place, like the prodigal son. In the morning, she went to the market, opened her shop, and waited for customers. Pleasure and surprise at her reappearance brought the old ones quickly back. She was friendly and helpful to them as before, but the slightest approach to inquiry as to where she had been or what she had been doing, she met with simple, obstinate silence. Gibbie's bounty and her faithful abstinence enabled her to add to her stock and extend her trade, because he was giving her £5 a month. That's a lot back then. By and by, she had the command of a little money, and when in the late autumn there came a time of scarcity and disease, she went among the poor like a disciple of Sir Gibbie. Some said that from her knowledge of their ways and from her judgment, and by her, it just says from her judgment, and by her personal ministration of what for her means she gave more bountifully than any. She did more to hearten their endurance than all the ladies together who administered money subscribed, from churches and stuff. It came to Sir Gibbie's ears and rejoiced his heart. His old friend was on the king's highway still. Sorry, my friend Elliot, he's passed away. And he sang a song that I got to hear after his death called Dancing on the Highway. And it's talking about this high path, the king's highway. And when he was alive, I was at the show with him, right, as his friend. And he sang, on a lost highway, Who was that? It's two country songs he sang about the path. Anyway. It warmed rejoiced his heart. His old friend was on the king's highway still. Oh, people don't realize if they just turn from our silliness, then it says angels rejoice in heaven when one person comes to repentance, right? In the meantime, she saw nothing of him. Not once did he pass her shop, where often her mental and not unfrequent her bodily attitude was that of a watching lover. The second day, indeed, she saw him at a little distance, and sorely her heart smote her, for one of his hands was in a sling, but he crossed to the other side, plainly to avoid her. She was none the less sure, however, that when she asked him, he would forgive her, and ask him she would, as soon as she had satisfactory proof of repentance to show him, like a long time sober, right? On a lost highway. Anyway, and it was such a beautiful night. Anyway, chapter LX. Is that 60? Yes. Arrangement and preparation. The next morning, I don't want to keep bending down, so I'm going to lift this up. I've got my Lord of the Rings over there. Watch, I'll show you. It's so grand. It's one of my favorites. I listen to it over and over again, sometimes read it. Yeah, look at anyway. Isn't that awesome? It has drawings in it and everything. I think it does. Is this the one with the drawings? Yeah. I can't show you because, oh, wow. Oh, because they're copyright, but I can show the cover. Anyway, sometimes I use it to prop up the mic and got a mic in my hand. Anyway, that's a Beastie Boys song. All right. Arrangement and preparation. The next morning, the first thing after breakfast, Mr. Sclater, having reflected that Ginevra was underage and they must be careful, so she's not 21 yet, I think. That's what they call underage back then. Resumed for the nonce with considerable satisfaction his office of guardian, and holding no previous consultation with Gibbie, walked to the cottage and sought an interview with Mr. Galbraith, which the latter accorded with a formality suitable to his idea of his own inborn grandeur, right? I don't know which one's presenting with grandeur, either one, but his assumption had no effect on nut-headed Mr. Sclater, who, in this matter, at all events, was at peace with his conscience. I have to inform you, Mr. Galbraith, he began, that Miss Galbraith... Hold on. Oh, said the laird. He used to be the lord of the land, right? He's not. I beg your pardon. I was not aware it was my daughter you wished to see. He rose and rang the bell. Mr. Sclater, annoyed at his manner, held his peace. Tell your mistress, said the laird, that the Reverend Mr. Sclater wishes to see her. The girl returned with a scared face and the news that her mistress was not in her room. The laird's loose mouth dropped looser. Miss Galbraith did us the honour to sleep at our house last night, said Mr. Sclater deliberately. The devil, cried the laird, relieved. Why, what are you aware of what you are saying, sir? Perfectly, and of what I saw, too. A blow looks bad on a lady's face. Like he's saying, did you do that, basically? Because he did. Good heaven! The little hussy dared to say I struck her? She did not say so, but no one could fail to see someone had. If you do not know who did it, I do, right? He could surmise. Send her home instantly, or I will come and fetch her, cried the laird. Come and dine with us if you want to see her. For the present, she remains where she is. You want her to marry Fergus Duff. She prefers my ward, Gilbert Galbraith, and I shall do my best for them. She is under age, said the laird. That fault will rectify itself as fast in my house as in yours, returned the minister. If you invite the publicity of a legal action, I will employ counsel and wait the result, right? You hit her. I'm not going to release her back to you. Mr. Sclater was not at all anxious to hasten the marriage. He would much rather, in fact, have it put off at least until Gibbie should have taken his degree, like finished college, right? The laird started up in a rage, but the room was so small that he had sat down again. The minister leaned back in his chair. He was too much displeased with the laird's behavior to lighten the matter for him by setting forth the advantages of having Sir Gibbie for a son-in-law. Mr. Sclater, said the laird at length, I am shocked, unspeakably shocked at my daughter's conduct to leave the shelter of her father's roof in the middle of the night and about 7 o'clock in the evening, interjected Mr. Sclater, and take refuge with strangers, continued the laird. By no means strangers, Mr. Galbraith, said the minister. You drive your daughter from your house and are then shocked to find she has taken refuge with friends. She is an unnatural child. She knows well enough what I think of her and what reason she has given me to think, so to think. When a man happens to be alone in any opinion, remarked the minister, Even if the opinion should be of his own daughter, the probabilities are he is wrong. He's correcting him, right? You have the wrong notion of your own daughter, right? Everyone but you has the deepest regard for Miss Galbraith. She has always cultivated strangely objectionable friendships, said the laird. For my own part, said the minister, as if heedless of the laird's last remark, although I believe she has no dowry, and there are reasons besides why the connection should not be desirable, I do not know a lady I should prefer for a wife to my ward. The minister's plain speaking was not without effect upon the laird. It made him uncomfortable. It is only when the conscience is wide awake and regnant that it can be appealed to without giving a cry for response. Again, he sat silent a while, then gathering all the pomp and stiffness at his command. Oblige me by informing my daughter, he said, that I request her, for the sake of avoiding scandal, to return to her father's house until she is of age. And in the meantime, you undertake. I undertake nothing, shouted the laird in his feeble, woolly, yet harsh voice. Then I refuse to carry your message. I will be no bearer of that from which, as soon as delivered, I should dissuade. I'm not going to tell her this if I'm going to tell her not to follow that. Allow me to ask, are you a minister of the gospel, and stir up a child against her own father, right? It says to honor your parents. So now he's saying, aren't you a minister? Why are you doing this, right? I'm not here to bandy words with you, Mr. Galbraith. He doesn't call him sir because he's no longer anyway or something. It is nothing to me what you think of me. If you will engage not to urge your choice upon Miss Galbraith, I think it probable she will at once return to you. If not, I will not force her inclination, said the laird. She knows my wish, and she ought to know the duty of a daughter. I will tell her what you say, answered the minister, and took his departure. When Gibbie heard, he was not at all satisfied with Mr. Sclater's interference to such result. He wished to marry Ginevra at once in order to take her from under the tyranny of her father. But he was really readily convinced it would be better, now things were understood, that she should go back to him and try once more to gain him. The same day she did go back, and Gibbie took up his quarters at the minister's. Ginevra soon found that her father had not yielded the idea of having his own way with her, but her spirits and courage were now so good that she was able not only to endure with less suffering, but to carry herself quite differently. Much less afraid of him, she was the more watchful to minister to his wants, dared a loving liberty now and then in spite of his coldness, took his objections with something of the gaiety of one who did not or would not believe he meant them, and when he abused Gibbie, did not answer a word, knowing events alone could set him right in his idea of him. Rejoiced that he had not laid hold of the fact that Glashruach was Gibbie's, she never mentioned the place to him, for she shrunk with sharpest recoil from the humiliation of seeing him, upon conviction, turn from Fergus to Gibbie. The kindest thing they could do for him would be to marry against his will and save him from open tergiversation, for no one could then blame him. He would be thoroughly pleased, and not having the opportunity of self-degradation would be saved the cause for self-contempt. Anyway, I hope you understood. For some time, Fergus kept on hoping. The laird, blinded by his own wishes, and expecting Gibbie would soon do something to bring public disgrace upon himself, did not tell him of his daughter's determination and self-engagement, while for her part Ginevra believed she fulfilled her duty towards him in the endeavor to convince him by her conduct that nothing could ever induce her to marry Fergus Stuff. She already told him many times. So the reminder of the session passed, the laird urging his objections against Gibbie and growing extravagant in his praise of Fergus, while Ginevra kept taking fresh courage and being of good cheer. Gibbie went to the cottage once or twice, but the laird made it so uncomfortable for them, and Fergus was so rude, that they agreed it would be better to content themselves with meeting while they had the chance. At the end of the month, Gibbie went home as usual, telling Ginevra he must be present to superintend what was going on at Glashruach to get the house ready for her, but saying nothing of what he was building there, right? It's a surprise. By the beginning of the winter, they had got the buttress wall finished and the coping on it. Also the shell of the new house roofed in, so that the carpenters had been at work all through the frost and snow. He had hired carpenters and an architect and everything. And things had made great progress without any hurry. And now, since the first day the weather had permitted, the masons were at work again, right? You can't do it when it's freezing, I guess. The bridge was built, the wall of the old house broken through, the turret carried aloft, the channel of the little burn, the river, right? They had found completely blocked by a great stone at the farther edge of the landslip. Up to this stone, they opened the channel, protecting it by masonry against further slip, so it wouldn't flood again. And by Gibbie's direction, left it so after boring the stone, which still turned every drop of water aside into the glash burn for a good charge of gunpowder. All the hollow where the latter burn had carried away pine wood and shrubbery, gravel drive and lawn, had been planted mostly with fir trees and a weir of strong masonry. A little way below the house kept the water back so that it rose and spread and formed a still pool just under the house, reflecting it far beneath. If Ginevra pleased, Gibbie meant to raise the weir and have quite a little lake in the hollow. A new approach had been contrived and was nearly finished before Gibbie returned to college. All right. Chapter XLI, 61. The wedding. Dun, da, da, da. All right. In the meantime, Fergus, dull as he was to doubt his own importance and success, for did not the public acknowledge both? Because he was just such this orator when he spoke sermons, but he was speaking of stuff of nothing, stuff of nonsense, sadly, not the gospel. As yet by degrees lost heart and hope so far as concerned Ginevra, and at length told the laird that, much as he valued his society and was indebted for his kindness, he must deny himself the pleasure of visiting any more at the cottage. So plainly was his presence unacceptable to Miss Galbraith. The laird blustered, forgetting to hint at the ingratitude of forsaking him. After all he had done and borne in the furthering of his interest, Ginny must at length come to see what reason and good sense required, right, of her. No, her good sense is not to go with Fergus Duff. But Fergus had at last learned his lesson and was no longer to be blinded. Besides, there had lately come to his church a certain shopkeeper, retired, rich, with one daughter, and as his hope of the dignity of being married to Ginevra faded, he had come to feel the enticement of Miss Laprake's money and good looks, which gained in force considerably when he began to understand the serious offsets there were to the honor of being son-in-law to Mr. Galbraith, a nobody as was old Laprake in himself and his position. He was at least looked upon with respect, argued Fergus, and indeed the man was as honest as it possible for any worshipper of mammon to be, right? The shopkeeper was a worshipper of mammon, which I think in the Bible it says you won't inherit the kingdom of God. Mammon is like money, like materiality. It's like a worship of... There's so much I could say. I'll just leave it be. Fergus therefore received the laird's expostulations and encouragements with composure, but when at length, in his growing acidity, Mr. Galbraith reflected on his birth and his own condescension in showing him friendship, Fergus left the house, never to go near it again. Within 3 months, for a second protracted courtship was not to be thought of. So 3 months later, Duff married Miss Laprake and lived respectable ever after, took to writing hymns, became popular afresh through his poetry, and exercised a double influence for the humiliation of Christianity. Horrible hymns and horrible sermons. But what matter, while he counted himself fortunate and thought himself happy, his fame spread, he had good health, his wife worshipped him, and if he had a valet, I have no doubt he would have been a hero to him, thus climbing the topmost untrodden peak of the world's greatness, like worldly wise, not even worldly wise, in Pilgrim's Progress, which Gibbie read earlier in the story. Anyway, he mentioned it. When the next evening came and Fergus did not appear, the laird fidgeted and stormed, then sank into a moody silence. When the second night came and Fergus did not come, the sequence was the same, with exasperated symptoms. Night after night passed thus, and Ginevra began to fear for her father's reason, right? His mind. She challenged him to play backgammon with her, but he scorned the proposal. She begged him to teach her chess, but he scouted the notion of her having wit enough to learn. My kids taught me, right? As she offered to read to him, entreated him to let her do something with him, but he repelled her every advance with contempt and surliness, which now and then broke into rage and vituperation. As soon as Gibbie returned, Ginevra let him know how badly things were going with her father. They met, consulted, agreed that the best thing was to be married at once, made their preparations, and confident that, if asked, he would refuse his permission, proceeded for his sake as if they had it, right? Because he's not in his right mind anyway. One morning, as he sat at breakfast, this is awesome, as he sat at breakfast, Mr. Galbraith received from Mr. Torrey, whom he knew as the agent in the purchase of Glashruach, and whom he supposed to have bought it from Major Colsimon, a letter more than respectful, stating that, all right, watch the letter that happens. This is the setup. Matters had come to light regarding the property, which rendered his presence on the spot indispensable for their solution, especially as there might be papers of consequence in view of the points in question in some drawer or cabinet of those he had left locked behind him. The present owner, therefore, through Mr. Torrey, begged most respectfully that Mr. Galbraith would sacrifice 2 days of his valuable time and visit Glashruach. They're in the city, so this is out in the countryside. The results, he did not doubt, would be to the advantage of both parties, like he would give him some kind of reward. If carriage and four with postilions, that he might make the journey in all possible comfort, should be at his house the next morning at 10 o'clock, if that hour would be convenient. For weeks the laird had been an unmitigated bore to himself, and the invitation laid hold upon him by the most projecting handle of his being, namely his self-importance. He made up his own story about his importance. It's earlier in the book. George MacDonald explains it so well. He describes it. He wrote at once to signify his gracious assent, and in the evening told his daughter he was going to Glashruach on business, and had arranged for Miss Kimball to come and stay with her till his return, right? She was the teacher at the school that Ginevra had gone to. Anyway, at 9 o'clock, the schoolmistress came to breakfast, and at 10, a traveling carriage with 4 horses drew up at the door, looking nearly as big as the cottage. With monstrous stateliness and a fur coat on his arm, the laird descended to his garden gate and got into the carriage, which instantly dashed away for the western road, restoring Mr. Galbraith to the full consciousness of his inherited grandeur that he had squandered away, right? If he was not exactly laird of Glashruach, again he was something quite as important. His carriage was just out of the street, with a second also with 4 horses, when a second of 4 horses drew up, to the astonishment of Miss Kimball, at the garden gate. Out of it stepped Mr. and Mrs. Sclater, then a young gentleman, whom she thought very graceful, until she discovered it was that low-lived Sir Gilbert and Mr. Torrey, the lawyer, right? Guess what's happening? They came trooping into the little drawing room, shook hands with them both, and sat down, Sir Gilbert beside Ginevra. But nobody spoke. What could it mean? A morning call? It was too early, and 4 horsemen to a morning call. A pastoral visitation. 4 horses and a lawyer to a pastoral visitation. Why would a pastor come for this, right? It must, after all, be a pastoral visitation, for there was the minister commencing a religious service, during which, however, it suddenly revealed itself to the horrified spinster that she was part and parcel of a clandestine wedding. Clandestine wedding. An anxious father had placed her in charge of his daughter, and this was how she was fulfilling her trust. There was Ginevra being married in a brown dress, and to that horrid lad who called himself a baronet, and hobnobbed with a low market woman, right? He was carrying, anyway. But alas, just as she was recovering her presence of mind, Mr. Sclater pronounced them husband and wife. She gave a shriek and cried out, "I forbid the banns," at which the company, bride and bridegroom included, broke into a loud smile. The ceremony over, Ginevra glided from the room and returned almost immediately in her little brown bonnet. Sir Gilbert caught up his hat, and Ginevra held out her hand to Miss Kimball. Then at length, the abashed and aggrieved lady found words of her own. "Ginevra," she cried, "you are never going to leave me alone in the house after inviting me to stay with you till your father returned." But the minister answered her. "It was her father who invited you, I believe, not Lady Galbraith," he said, because she's now a lady, right? Because Sir Gilbert just married her. "And you understood perfectly that the invitation was not meant to give her pleasure. You would doubtless have her postpone her wedding journey on your account, but my lady is under no obligation to think of you." He had heard of her tattle against Sir Gilbert, and then rudely showed his resentment. Anyway, she had tattled in the wrong way, but anyway. Miss Kimball burst into tears. Ginevra kissed her, right, on the cheek, right, or whatever, and said, "Never mind, dear Miss Kimball. You could not help it. The whole thing was arranged. We are going after my father, and we have the best horses." Mr. Torrey laughed outright. "A new kind of runaway marriage," he cried. "The happy couple pursuing the obstinate parent with 4 horses. Ha, ha, ha." But after the ceremony, said Mr. Sclater, here the servant ran down the steps with a carpet bag and opened the gate for her mistress. Lady Galbraith got into the carriage. Sir Gilbert followed. There was kissing and tears at the door of it. Mrs. Sclater drew back. The postilions spurred their horses. Off went the second carriage, faster than the first, right? And the minister's party walked quietly away, leaving Miss Kimball to declaim to the maid of all the work, who cried so that she did not hear a word she said. The schoolmistress put on her bonnet, and full of indignation carried her news of the treatment to which she had been subjected to the Reverend Fergus Duff, who remarked to himself that it was sad to see youth and beauty turn away from genius and influence to wed money and idiocy, gave a sigh, and went to see Miss Laprick. Ridiculous. Anyway, between the second stage and the third, Gibbie and Ginevra came in sight of their father's carriage, having arranged with the postilions that the 2 carriages should not change horses at the same places. They easily passed unseen by him. While thinking of nothing so little as their proximity, he sat in state before the door of a village inn. So they're changing horses and he's just eating some lunch somewhere. Just as Mr. Galbraith was beginning to hope the major had contrived a new approach to the place, the carriage took an unexpected turn, and he found presently they were climbing by a zigzag road the height over the Lorry Burn. But the place was no longer his, and to avoid a sense of humiliation, he avoided taking any interest in the change. A young woman, it was Donald's eldest sister, but he knew nothing of her, opened the door to him and showed him up the stair to his old study. Okay, so he's going to where he used to sit. There a great fire was burning, but beyond that, everything, even to the trifles on his writing table, was just as it was when he left the house. His chair stood in its usual position by the fire, and wine and biscuits were on a little table near. Very considerate, he said to himself. I trust the Major does not mean to keep me waiting, though. Deuced hard to have to leave a place like this. He doesn't really want to, right? You'll see. Weary with his journey, he fell into a doze, dreamed of his dead wife, woke suddenly, and heard the door of the room open. There was Major Colsimon entering with outstretched hand, and there was a lady, his wife doubtless, right? But watch. But how young the Major was! He had imagined him a man in middle age at least. Bless his soul! Was he never to get rid of this impostor fellow? It was not the Major. It was the rascal calling himself Sir Gilbert Galbraith. The half-witted wretch, his fool of a daughter, insisted on marrying. Here he was, ubiquitous as Satan. And, bless his soul again, there was the minx, Jenny. He called her Jenny, even though his wife named her Ginevra, and she didn't ever want her called Jenny. Looking as if the place was her own. The silly tears in her eyes, too. It was all too absurd. He had just been dreaming of his dead wife, and clearly that was it. He was not awake yet. He tried hard to wake, but the dream mastered him. It was really real, right? Jenny, he said, as the two stood for a moment regarding him a little doubtfully, but with smiles of welcome, what is the meaning of this? I did not know Major Colsimon had invited you, and what is this person doing here? Papa, replied Ginevra, with a curious smile, half merry, half tearful. This person is my husband, Sir Gilbert Galbraith of Glashruach, and you are at home in your own study again, right? Because it's his house, not yours. Will you never have done masquerading, Jenny? He returned. Inform Major Colsimon that I request to see him immediately. He turned towards the fire and took up a newspaper. They thought it better to leave him. And he sat. As he sat, by degrees, the truth grew plain to him. But not one other word on the matter did the man utter to the day of his death. He never brought it up again. When dinner was announced, he walked straight from the dining room door to his former place at the foot of the table. But Robina Grant was equal to the occasion. She caught up the dish before him and set it at the side. There Gibbie seated himself, and after a moment's hesitation, Ginevra placed herself opposite her husband. The next day, Gibbie provided him with something to do. He had the chest of papers found in the old house of Galbraith, carried it into his study, and the lawyer found, because he was a lawyer before, Ginevra's father was, found both employment and interest for weeks in deciphering and arranging them, amongst many others concerning the property. Its tenures and boundaries appeared some papers which associated and compared through considerable doubt on the way in which portions of it had changed hands and passed from those of Gibbie's ancestors into those of Ginevra's. So it actually was Gibbie's property before, it looked like, who were lawyers as well as Galbraiths, and the laird was keen of scent as any nosehound after dishonesty in other people. In the course of a fortnight, so 2 weeks, he found himself so much at home in his old quarters and so much interested in those papers and his books that when Sir Gilbert informed him Ginevra and he were going back to the city, he pronounced it decidedly the better plan, seeing he was there himself, to look after affairs. He would look after. For the rest of the winter, therefore, Mr. Galbraith played the grand seigneur as before among the tenants of Glashruach. Anyway, chapter 62, The Burn. I think this is the last chapter. Yes, there's only a few pages left. We have just time. I'm so glad for you. If you're enjoying this I haven't put it yet on the podcast, but I plan to, with my podcast, Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill, studying the nature and development of spiritual consciousness. We have 60 hours of that. I don't remember how many hours of this we have. I never knew it was going to be this long. Okay, the burn. That means the river, right? The burn. Anyway. The moment they were settled in the old house, Gibbie, resumed the habits of the former winter, which Mistress Croll's failure had interrupted. And what a change it was to Ginevra, from imprisonment to ministration. She was like imprisoned in the house with her father. Now she could take care of people that needed it. She found difficulties at first, as may readily be believed, but presently help came. As soon as Mistress Croll heard of their return, she went immediately to Lady Galbraith one morning while Sir Gibbie was at college, literally knelt at her feet, and with tears told her the whole tale, beseeching her intercession with Sir Gibbie. I want nothing, she insisted, but his favour and the light of his bonny countenance, right, to forgive her. The end, of course, was that she was gladly received again into the house, where once more she attended to all the principal, at least of her former duties. Before she died, there was great change and growth in her. She was none of those before, whom pearls must not be cast. Wow. Jesus speaks of, do not cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample your pearls and trample you as well. And I read in my commentary from the 1100s, this is from the 1800s, but in my commentary by Blessed Theophylact, a saint, an Orthodox saint, he said that swine means people that were Christian but lived in riotous living, that forgot their Christianity. And dogs were, because it says don't give them to the dogs as well, or something as well. I don't know. But people that never turned to the light of truth, which that's something, anyway, you can read the passage. Every winter for many years, Sir Gilbert and Lady Galbraith occupied the old house in the city, which by degrees came at length to be known as the refuge of all that were in honest distress, the salvation of all in themselves, such as could be helped, and a covert for the night to all the houseless of whatever sort, except those drunk at the time. Caution had to be exercised and judgment used. The caution was tender and the judgment stern. The next year they built a house in a sheltered spot on Glashgar, and thither from the city they brought many invalids to spend the summer months under the care of Janet and her daughter Robina, whereby not a few were restored sufficiently to earn their bread for a time thereafter. The very day the session was over, they returned to Glashruach, where they were received by the laird, as he was still called, as if they had been guests, right, to her father. They found Joseph, the old butler, reinstated, and Angus again acting as gamekeeper. Ginevra welcomed Joseph, but took the first opportunity of telling Angus that for her father's sake, Sir Gilbert allowed him to remain. But the first act of violence he should at once be dismissed and probably prosecuted as well, prosecuted by the law, right? Because he had shot Gibbie when he was, anyway, it's a long story. It's in here. Anyway, Donald's eldest brother was made bailiff. Before long, Gibbie got the other two also about him, and as soon as, with justice, he was able, settled them together upon one of his farms. Every Saturday, so long as Janet lived, they met, as in the old times, at the cottage, only with Ginevra in the place of the absent Donald. More to her own satisfaction, after all, than Robert's, Janet went home first. To be at hand, she said, to open the door. Tell him when he comes. So she adopted Gibbie. She went first to heaven, and so she said she'd be opening the door, holding the door open for her husband, Robert, when he came later. Then Robert went to his sons below on their farm, where he was well taken care of, but happily he did not remain long behind his wife. That first summer, Nicey returned to Glashruach, that's one of their daughters, to wait on Lady Galbraith, was more her friend than her servant, and when she married, was settled on the estate, with her children to help out there still. For some little time, Ginevra was fully occupied in getting her house in order and furnishing the new part of it. When that was done, Sir Gilbert gave an entertainment to his tenants. Hold on, I'm crying. I've got my handkerchief. Look, I got a real one, like the story. When that was done, Sir Gilbert gave an entertainment to his tenants. The laird preferred a trip to the city on business to the humiliation of being present as other than the greatest, though perhaps he would have minded it less had he ever himself given a dinner to his tenants, but he never had, right? Robert and Janet declined the invitation. This is back before they'd passed. "We're over old for making merry upper in the house," said Janet. "But by G, my bonny Sir Gibbie, till we're up yonder and going, we will see. Soon we'll see. Anyway, the place of honor was therefore given to Jean Mavor." Wow. She was the woman who Gibbie helped when he was little. He secretly helped. They called him a brownie. They thought he was like a little fairy that came, but he was just Gibbie. Anyway, was beside herself with joy to see her Bruni lord of the land. And to be seated beside him in respect and friendship. But her brother said it was clean ridiculous, and not to the last would consent to regard the new laird as other than half-witted, insisting that everything was done by his wife, right? He's telling her what to say, and she's speaking it, but he's saying she doesn't know what she's reading. She's just making it up. And that the talk on his fingers was a mere pretense, right? Even though you could learn the alphabet in about an hour, right? It's too bad people don't. They taught it to me when I was in school. I love languages, so anyway. In the course of it, Sir Gibbie took occasion to apologize for having once disturbed the peace of the countryside by acting the supposed part of a bruni, and in relating his adventures of the time, accompanied his wife's texts with such graphic illustrations of gesture that his audience laughed at the merry tale till the tears ran down their cheeks. Then, with a few allusions to his strange childhood, he thanked the God who led him through the thorny ways into the very arms of love and peace in the cottage of Robert and Janet Grant, whence, and not from the fortune he had since inherited, came all his peace. His peace came from knowing the Jesus that they knew, the real one, right? And them taking him in when he was just left. Anyway, "He desires me to tell you," said Lady Galbraith, "that he was a stranger, and yon folk of Daurside took him in. And if ever he can do a kindness to you or yours, he will. He desires me also to say that you ought not to be left ignorant, that you have a poet of your own, born and bred among you, Donald Grant, the son of Robert and Janet, the friend of Sir Gilbert's heart, and one of the noblest of men. And he begs you to allow me to read you a poem he had from him this very morning, probably just written. It's called The Laverock. I will read it as well as I can. I probably can't. We'll see. Because it's in this old Scottish, but I'll show you it so you can screenshot it and read it yourself and put it in the comments if you understand it. "If any of you do not like poetry," he says, Sir Gilbert says, "you can go to the kitchen and light your pipes, and he will send you your wine there to you," right? She ceased, not one stirred, and she read the verses, which, for the sake of having Donald in at the last of my book, I will print. Those who do not care for verse may, metaphorically, I will not be rude, go and smoke their pipe in the kitchen, right? If you don't, you can click off of this, right? The Laverock, that means the lark. Okay, hold on. I'll do my best. All right, I'll show it to you first. And I think it's on the next page. And this is the end of the book. So we're going a little bit over, but the lark. Laverock in the lift, which means the sky. It says sky right here in parentheses. Have ye no song thrift? Are ye scattered such heights and lay it adrift? Wasterful Laverock, lark, Don't you know, as ye hing over men, what honey ye sing a penny to spend, heartless laverock. But up there yon, in the bow of the blue, hold skirlin as the goin' a were new. It says in parentheses, you keep shrilling, right? Tomb heated laverock, empty-headed lark, right? That's what it says in the parentheses. Hath your own, hath you're over blithe. I see a great scythe. Swing where your nesty lies, down the lithe, the shelter. Lilton laverock, Lilton lark. I sick as soon, birdie come down, you're fey to sing such a merry tune. It says death doomed in parentheses. Gowkit laverock, silly. It says silly lark, basically. Come to your nest, your wife surpressed, sire, say S-A-I-R, pressed, P-R-E-S-T. She's clean worn out, with doing her best. Roving laverock, the roving lark, right? When have you heard, you're surely mad? Is there nobody there to guide you, Dowd? That means below. Menseless laverock, come down and conform, pike an honest worm, and hap your bairns free the muckle storm. Spindrift laverock, help your burns. That means your little, lark babies. Give them this worm. The bird sings, my nesty it lieth, in the how a hand, a hollow. That means a hollow. The swing of the scythe, it'll miss it by span. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Here's the other side. I wish I could read it. Anyway, I'm doing my best. Oh, and here's the rest. Okay. I hope it's clear. Anyway. The lift is so cheery, the wind set free. I henge over my dearie, I sing 'cause I see. My wife's wee breast high grows warm with my song, and ilk crumpled up beastie knows no to think long. Up here the sun sings, but he only shines there. Ye han of no wings, you haven't any wings, but come up on a prayer. The man sings, ye wee darling creature, you rant over your song, like an old nature grandchild, it says, till you're home by the king, with a capital K. Ye wee feathered priesty, your bells in your throat, your altar, your breasty. This is, his heart. That's where he's singing from, the lark. Your mitre, forget. I have a book upstairs by St. Porphyrius, and he had this vision of a lark singing in the middle of a forest or something. It spurred on all of these things in his life. Anyway, offering an Aaron was a priest under Moses, right? You burn heart and brain. You darten and daring. Flee back to your own. Ye wee minor prophet. It must be my belief, and I'm doon a toffet, and you abound in grief. You devet me a doubt it. It says deafened and buffeted in the parentheses. And called me a fool. I'm near hand persuaded to go into your school. For Bertie, I'm thinking, you know more nor me, given you haven't been drinking, and sing as you see. You main have such at it, such Gayan Farbin, it says considerably inwards in the parentheses. And heart for the might oft was sore for 9 men, it says serve. Somebody's been till room to you whisper, said birdies which seem till even when they fa. I don't know what F-A means, but anyway, here's the last of it. And here, I'll go slow if you want to pause it and take screenshots and read it. I learned in my class on C.S. Lewis, I took it 5 times, I think, in college. I sat through it afterwards. Anyway, he said you ought to read a poem aloud 3 times to understand it. I'm not going to read it here. You can replay it. No, don't replay this, but anyway, you can read it. After the reading of the poem, Sir Gilbert and Lady Galbraith withdrew and went towards the new part of the house, where they had their rooms, on the bridge, over which Ginevra scarcely ever passed without stopping to look both up and down the dry channel in the rock. She lingered as usual, and gazed from its windows. Below, the waterless bed of the burn opened out of the great valley of the Dower. Above was the landslip, and beyond it the stream rushing down the mountain. Gibbie pointed up to it. She gazed a while and gave a great sigh. He asked her. Their communication was now more like that between 2 spirits. Even signs had become almost unnecessary. What she wanted or missed, she looked at his face and said, "Nothing but the song of my Bernie Gibbie." Right? The river used to be underneath her window. But Gibbie knew this. Watch. He took a small pistol from his pocket and put it in her hand. Then, opening the window, signed to her to fire it. She had never fired a pistol and was a little frightened, but would have been utterly ashamed to shrink from anything Gibbie would have her do. She held it out. Her hand trembled. He laid his upon it, and it grew steady. She pulled the trigger and dropped the pistol with a little cry. He signed to her to listen. A moment passed, and then, like a hugely magnified echo, came a roar that rolled from mountain to mountain like a thunder drum. The next instant, the landslip seemed to come hurrying down the channel, roaring and leaping. It was the mud-brown waters of the burn that came up from the mountain and told the story all the way from the top, right? The river, careening along as if mad with joy at having regained their ancient course. Ginevra stared with parted lips, delight growing to apprehension at the live thing momentarily neared the bridge with tossing mane of foam, and brown courser came rushing on and shot thundering under. They turned, and from the other window saw it tumbling headlong down the steep descent to the Lorry. By quick gradations, even as they gazed, the mud melted away and water grew clearer and clearer. In a few minutes, a small mountain river of a lovely, lucid brown, transparent as smoke crystal, was dancing along under the bridge. It had crossed its roar and was sweetly singing. "Let us see it from my room, Gibbie," said Ginevra. They went up, and from the turret window looked down upon the water. They gazed until, like the live germ of the gathered twilight, it was scarce to be distinguished, but by abstract motion. "It's my old Bernie," said Ginevra, "and its old song. I warrant it hasn't forgotten to note of it. Gibbie, you give me such a thing," right? Like, he had the gunpowder in it so that it would, the abutment would go back. Anyway, given I was a Bernie, would I run sang Gibbie, and Ginevra heard the words, though Gibbie could utter only the air he had found for them so long ago. So there was a poem that Donald wrote, and Gibbie did music for it. He could just hum, because he couldn't speak. She threw herself into his arms, and hiding her face on his shoulder, clung silent to her silent husband. Over her lovely bowed head, she gazed into the cool spring night, sparkling with stars and shadowy with mountains. His eyes climbed the stairs of Glashgar to the lonely peak, dwelling among the lights of God, and if upon their way up the rocks they met no visible sentinels of heaven, He needed neither ascending stairs nor descending angels, for a better than the angels was with them. The end. Right? Was it Jacob? Yes. Whose name, Jacob means one who manipulates or is twisted. And I heard Israel means one who hears God or whom God has straightened out. Jacob saw a ladder going up and down from heaven, and angels were going up and down. And they have Christ in their hearts, right? So he's saying they don't even need the angels going up and down, even though they are ministering angels. And he didn't need to see them because they were there nonetheless, somehow, and in their hearts. Anyway, that's the end. I don't know yet what story we'll read next. Much love. There's little Leia. Thanks for being with me for this whole journey. Much love. Goodbye.